Assassins, to another episode of the Dark Assassins podcast, the show that dives deep into not just technology, but the concepts, software, and procedures behind it all, and explains it so simply that even your grandma can understand it. As always, I'm your host, the Dark Assassin. So if you are unaware, Apple held an event this week. They held their annual September event, which is known for their iPhones and iPhone accessories. So we're going to be diving into that, going through all the new hardware updates, all the changes, and in some cases, lack of changes, and even a death that occurred in the Apple lineup, which we might have to take some time to mourn. But first, as you are all aware, at least devoted listeners of this podcast are well aware that I am an idiot. I am a big-time idiot, and this week just proved that even further. So, this week I was updating my home lab servers as usual, like you do, and after I'd updated everything, for whatever reason, I realized on my home labs subnetwork that I have configured, I was no longer getting internet. I was able to get internet fine on just my regular, Wi-Fi network, but on my specific home lab network, I was unable to get internet. And it took me a lot longer than I care to admit to figure out the problem. It took me pretty much the whole day, and I called my ISP because I thought they were the problem when in reality they weren't the problem. So sorry, ISP, on that one. I spent probably about an hour with them, but the reason why I thought it was their problem was I've had frequent problems, where my internet will just kind of go out and I have to reboot the modem or something like that. So that's what I did when the internet stopped working. Reboot the modem. That didn't work. Tried it again. That still didn't work. Got on the phone with the ISP. Over the course of that call, unplugged the route, completely unplugged the modem router combo, plugged it back in. Unscrewed the coax cable, plugged that back in. Nothing worked. And then I was digging through, some configs on my pfSense router, which is the router that I use for my, home network, or for my home lab. Trying to configure things on there. Nothing worked. I tried restoring from the backup from a version I knew worked. That didn't work. I tried reinstalling it. That didn't work. And I was like, man, I have no idea what's going on. And then eventually I went to my ISP's router, showed all the devices on there, and saw one thing that was out of place. I had a DHCP device, which I guess if you're unfamiliar with what DHCP is, I'm not going to go too deep into it because we got a lot of stuff to cover with Apple. But DHCP is Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. And basically all that is when your computer or your phone or whatever device that connects to the internet needs to connect to the internet, it goes to your router and it's like, hey, I need an IP address. And your router's like, boy, I got you. And it sends it one. And now there's a range that you can configure, what IPs are able to be leased out by the router. And I made the stupid mistake, which I knew better, to assign a static IP address inside the DHCP range. So you might be able to see where I'm going with this. And a Wi-Fi device, which actually happened to be my Raspberry Pi, which is included in my update script that updates all my servers. I guess somehow because I have the Wi-Fi on disabled, but I guess somehow it got re-enabled like through the update or whatever. So then it, connects to my Wi-Fi network and snags the IP address that's assigned to my pfSense router, which runs, my entire home lab network. So basically shutting down my entire network because of a DHCP collision. So yeah, don't be an idiot like me. Make sure when you assign static IP addresses, they are outside your DHCP range so you don't run into this issue. So yeah, that was a fun, like 8 hours, or basically an entire day trying to figure that out. So that was a good time. But my idiocy aside, let's get into the Apple event. So Apple started off talking about the new Apple Watch. So they released 3 new Apple Watches at this event. They released the new Series 8 Apple Watch. It has all the same health features as the previous ones, like sleep tracking, blood oxygen, ECG, heart rate, all that good stuff. And it now has a new temperature sensor. And it has 2 of them. One of them is near your wrist to help, and then one of them is near the screen. This is meant to kind of help eliminate differences with outside temperature, although it won't actually give you your body temperature because, as you might be able to imagine, your wrist isn't really a good place to check your body temperature. But it samples it, every 5 seconds. So it's at least able to, give you an inclination of, hey, maybe your temperature is going up, maybe your temperature is going down, and kind of be able to allow you to visualize that, over the course of, a day or a week or a month or whatever. And the real thing that they kind of marketed this to was to women and for, period tracking and all that good stuff. Obviously, I'm not a woman, so I don't know how really the temperature, fits into all that calculation, but they added it, so it apparently gives better tracking for that, so that's cool. One thing they did emphasize with all this privacy, or what Apple loves to emphasize, privacy, obviously, and then when they were talking about all these health features, they made it clear that all the health data on your device is encrypted. It's only on your device. And then if you do want to, send it up to sync it with your iCloud, for example, all that data is end-to-end encrypted. So what that means is not even Apple knows any of the data that's going through. So it's encrypted on your device, and then in transit it's encrypted, and then it's even encrypted in iCloud. So there's no way for even Apple to know what that data is. So that's cool. Obviously, because the algorithms and everything that they use is proprietary, you have to take that with a grain of salt. But, I'm inclined to believe that if it's end-to-end encrypted and they're using encryption with like on-device encryption, all that, they shouldn't be able to view it. And then they also added some new emergency services. So all the same services that you know about, like fall detection and emergency SOS, that's obviously still there. And they added a new crash detection feature, which is pretty cool. It uses like some new sensors that they have in the watch. It can detect like surround sound, like the sound of like an airbag deploying, and like the load of the G load of being in an actual crash. So it can detect it that way. And then when it detects a crash, it immediately contacts emergency services with your location, which is pretty handy. And it also contacts your emergency contact. So if you have, your spouse or your parents or whoever, it'll automatically contact them as well, which is definitely nice. So it has the ability to detect front, side, rear, and rollover collisions, which pretty handy there. And how they trained this was they trained it on 1 million hours of crash data for their machine learning model. So it's a lot of crash data. Since generally car crashes, I don't believe last too terribly long. So if somehow getting 1 million hours of crash data, that's a lot of crashes that they had to source data from. So I don't know if that was all, in-house testing where they had like in the video that they played for this event, they did show, like an actual crash test site, not like actual cars crashing together. So I don't know if they were just doing crashes there or how they were necessarily getting that data, but that's how they trained their models to test or check for the detecting a crash. And the other cool thing too is it's not like it's an always running feature. It only runs while you're driving, and it only computes if a crash occurred, when the crash actually happens, and all that computing is done on device, so you're not having to reach out to the spooky cloud for any of that computing, which is definitely nice. It has an 18-hour battery life, and a new feature that they're implementing is low power mode. And with this low power mode, you can get actually up to 36 hours of battery life on a full charge, which is pretty darn nice, especially if you're someone that likes to use the Apple Watch for the sleep tracking features. You're not necessarily tied directly to having, to make sure you charge your watch like right when you wake up or right before you go to bed, that kind of thing, so you can actually make it through the night. So this is nice. Or if you're on an extended trip that you won't have access to a charger, this is another great feature there. So you might be wondering, how does this increase in battery life actually happen? So one thing it does is it turns off the auto workout detection and the always on display. But it also, while doing that, it also keeps all the health detection features turned on. So like your sleep tracking, your blood oxygen, your ECG, all that good stuff. It keeps that running while turning off, the stuff you might not necessarily need if you want to save power, like the workouts and the always on display. So it turns those off. So this low power mode is coming to actually all Apple Watches with the new watchOS 9 update for Series 4 and later. So if you have an Apple Watch Series 4 or later and you update to the new version of watchOS, you should be able to get this low power mode and get some increase in battery life when using it, which is very nice to see. Also, if you have an Apple Watch that has cellular capabilities, you now have international roaming for that. Obviously, this includes you must have watchOS 9 for that, and this is only available on the Series 5 and newer. So if you have an Apple Watch Series 5 or newer and you have cellular on it, you can get international roaming. So the starting price for this, I believe, is unchanged at $399 for the base GPS model. And then if you want the cellular model, that goes up to $499. And that's available today. You can order it now, and it'll be available on September 16th. So if you order it now, you should get it by September 16th, unless I haven't actually checked their page today as the recording of this podcast episode to know if those dates have been pushed at all, since I know a common theme with Apple events in the past year or so is as soon as they drop something, if you order it right away, you'll be able to get it by the date they say, but if you order it like the next day, it's available or whatever, the dates slip and they push. So, that's what they said. By the time you listen to this or, go to order one, maybe those dates might be different, but that is what it is. Another watch they released was the Apple Watch SE, which was kind of sort of underwhelming. It's basically the same watch as the old Apple Watch SE. Really the only difference is it has the same chip that's in the Series 8, so it basically just got a spec bump. There's still no blood oxygen, still no ECG, still no temperature sensing, so really just a new chip, and that was about it. But I believe it got maybe new colors. I'm not sure. But its starting price unchanged at $249 for the GPS model and $299 for the cellular model. Again, similar to the Apple Watch Series 8, it's available today, and you can order it today rather, and it's available on September 16th. And Apple wasn't done because they released another new watch called the Apple Watch Ultra. It's basically branded to the exploration, adventure, endurance. They had a really long section in the keynote about being used for diving. We'll get into that a little bit later. But it's pretty cool thing. So there's been a lot of criticism that I've seen online about people hating on the design and all that stuff. If you haven't seen it, go look it up. But basically, the screen is kind of embedded in the body. So unlike the current Apple Watches, where the glass screen is kind of curved and rounded over the watch itself, on the Apple Watch Ultra, basically the it's made out of titanium, and the titanium shell kind of like comes in like the normal Apple Watch would, and then kind of juts upward to surround the glass screen of the Apple Watch. Kind of an interesting design, but man, is this bad boy an absolute unit. It is 49 millimeters. So if you have, small wrists or you're a small person, not exactly sure how it would look on you from a design perspective, but, it's a really big boy. So another new feature that it has over the regular Apple Watch is it has this action button that Apple's calling it, and it gives users quick control for a range of different functions. The button's customizable, so you can have it do a bunch of different things. You can use it to start a workout, switch between legs of a race. You can do like some other things. They had some other, scuba diving functions that you could do with it. I mean, it's customizable, so you can really do whatever you want with it. And they updated the crown and the button on the side, and they put this like guard around the crown of the watch, so to prevent, I guess, like being bumped and knocked around, which is pretty cool. And they designed it so that you can actually use it with gloves, which is pretty convenient if you're out and about in the wilderness and it's cold outside and you got gloves on. Everybody that's been in a situation like that knows how kind of annoying it is that you have to take your glove off in order to either do something on your watch or do something on your phone. It's kind of annoying, and then your hand gets cold. Kind of a pain. So that is a nice feature to see. One other thing that's interesting about this watch is all of the models are cellular equipped models. So there's no difference between just the base GPS model and the GPS plus cellular model, which is kind of cool. It makes the pricing structure a little bit interesting when you factor in we'll get to the price, but it's basically Apple always made the base Apple Watch and then a premium higher end Apple Watch. And it's basically, the same price area as that premium Apple Watch, what it used to be, but it's bigger. All of them have cellular, and it also has a bunch more features. So it's kind of an interesting scenario. But another great feature about this Apple Watch is it has up to 36 hours of battery life on a single charge. So if you buy the new Apple Watch Ultra, you can be laughing at the plebs with the regular one that have to use low power mode to get that 36 hours, and you get those 36 hours on a full charge without low power mode. And with low power mode, you can get up to 60 hours of battery life. It has I guess they built in some new battery optimization setting. I'm assuming that's the same as low power mode. Otherwise, I think it would be kind of weird that they would give it to the Apple Watch Ultra, but not the regular one. Seeing that, as far as I can tell, the chip and all as far as the chip's concerned, that would be doing all this processing is the same. But yeah, it is what it is. And they created some new bands specifically for this watch for a couple different. They have one more tailored to like running, one towards climbing, and one towards scuba diving, I believe. And they added a new dual frequency L1 and L5 GPS system. So this should give you, plus some new algorithms to provide a more accurate GPS location. So if you're in like a busy city, or you're out in the wilderness, and there's a bunch of tree cover and it's harder to get direct contact to the satellites, this new system basically allows for better accuracy for your location, which is pretty cool. So they redesigned the Compass app, and one thing that they added, which I wasn't it seemed like it was only coming to the Ultra, but it also seems like it should be able to come to basically any Apple Watch. But they specifically mentioned it for the Ultra. It has this new backtrack feature, which some people would argue that it's more of a gimmick than anything, but I think it's kind of cool. So basically what it allows you to do is set like waypoints on your watch, like as you go out, through your adventure or whatever. And then if for whatever reason you get lost, you can like backtrack through those waypoints so it can navigate you, back to where you came to help prevent you getting lost. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. It also has an 86 decibel siren built into it. So if you ever, get lost or you fall and you can't move or something, you can, blast the siren. And Apple claims that it can be heard up to 600 feet or 180 meters away. So that's pretty cool. I believe that would kind of have to be in optimal conditions. So if there's like a bunch of, trees around or something, it's probably not going to be that far. But if you're in like a really wide open area, probably be more likely to reach those kind of numbers. It also has a WR100 water resistance rating, which is up to 100 meters of depth, which is pretty deep. It's EN13319 certified. If you're into scuba diving, that probably means a lot to you. I don't really know what that certification means, but it's a big thing in scuba diving. It can also be used as your dive computer. So now all these features, and it starts at this price of $799, which obviously ain't cheap for a watch. That's a ton of money. But the way people are justifying this is kind of, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in this segment, was it's either the same price as the smaller version of that premium Apple Watch that they used to sell, or even cheaper than the larger version of the Apple Watch, that premium version of the Apple Watch that they used to sell, which only got up to 45 millimeters. This is 49 millimeters, so it's a bigger watch. It's cheaper than that premium version of the bigger watch, and it has a ton more features. But the other reason why people are able to are trying to justify it is if you actually, especially if you're from the diving aspect, if you're into scuba diving at all, like specific dive computers can basically range from as much as this Apple Watch to more. Plus, this Apple Watch also has the ability to do other things that are more watch oriented. So, depending on how you look at it, it could be seen as a pretty good value, but that still doesn't change the fact that it's $800. So it's essentially kind of back when the Pro Display XDR first dropped, everyone was like, oh, you had basically two camps. You had this is way overpriced, this is a $6,000, monitor, and then you had the camp that's like, yeah, but it's competing with a reference monitor, and reference monitors are like, X number the price, so it's actually a really good deal. So it really just kind of depends on, what you're going to use it for and, how you look at it. But, $800 is $800. I mean, there's no getting around that. But that, like the other Apple Watches, is available to order today. But it won't be actually available for you to receive until September 23rd. So another new hardware product that Apple launched was they launched an updated version of the AirPods Pro. So it's the same design as the old models, but it has a new H2 chip. It has new audio drivers and amplifiers for improved sound quality. One thing that they kind of hyped on was this ability to use your front-facing camera on your iPhone to create a personalized spatial audio profile specifically to you, which I guess is pretty cool. They said that their active noise cancellation it has up to double the performance of the older models with the improved chip, sensor locations, vents, all that kind of stuff. It has a new extra small ear tip, so if you had the old ones and none of the tips were really small enough to fit your ears, there's a new one. They updated the active added this new feature, I guess, which kind of builds upon transparency mode, which basically allowed you to hear the world around you. But they updated transparency mode to be what they call adaptive transparency mode, which basically is able to detect if there's like a really loud noise going on. So if there's like heavy machinery or something and you have transparency mode turned on, it'll like reduce the decibel level of that loud machinery for I guess safer hearing. So that's pretty cool to see. There's a new captive sensor on the stem of the AirPods Pro, so now you can, in addition to being able to click it essentially, you can also swipe up and down for volume control, which is a very nice feature, which is lacking in the current gen ones. So that's very nice to see. The listening time has been upped to 6 hours of listening time per charge, and with the charging case, you're able to get up to 30 hours of listening time. They did some updates to the charging case as well. They added a new speaker to the charging case, which before this speaker didn't have a charging case. So this basically allows you to find the case with the Find My app, which as an AirPods Pro user, I never have a problem, if the AirPods themselves go missing because they're either in my ears or in the case. But if I misplace the case, I don't know how to find it because it doesn't work in the Find My app. So that's definitely a cool thing. So you'll be able to use it in the Find My app, and it can actually make sound. So that's nice. They also added another feature, so you could easily attach a lanyard to it. So that's nice. I know there's a lot of cases out there for the AirPods and AirPods Pro, specifically, for this capability. So it's nice to see that they built that in. It should be the same starting price, the same $249. Able to order it September 9th, which actually at the launch of this podcast episode, so now you can see that I'm recording it in the past. By the time you're listening to this, you'll be able to order it, and it'll be available on September 23rd. So now we get into the iPhones. And the iPhones, for me, it was kind of a mixed bag. First off, we have to take a moment of silence to acknowledge the death of the iPhone mini because Apple killed it, which is kind of sad to see because it was a nice phone. It was really cute, nice and small, and it was sad to see it go. So let's have a little moment of silence. Okay, moment over. See, it was a mini moment of silence, just like it was a mini phone. Puns. But they didn't, completely kill off a secondary iPhone 14. Instead, they created the iPhone 14 Plus, which is literally just the iPhone Max version, just without the Pro name and renamed to Plus. It's the same 6.7 inch screen size. So you have the iPhone 14 at 6.1 inches and the iPhone 14 Plus at 6.7 inches. Both still 60 hertz refresh displays. So if you're hoping for ProMotion to get brought down to the iPhone 14, you're out of luck. They say there's a new internal design for improved thermals. But this is where it gets interesting because it's the same chip as last year. So last year on the iPhone 13, it used the A15 Bionic, and in the iPhone 14, it uses the A15 Bionic. Now, I guess granted, you could say it's a quote-unquote different chip because it's using the A15 that was from the iPhone 13 Pro line, which I believe had an extra GPU core. So you get one extra GPU core over the iPhone 13, which honestly, are you going to notice that? No, you're not. So that's an interesting move by Apple. It's hard to say if this was because the chip shortage that's going on, supply chain issues, who knows what the reasoning was. But this is the first time ever that a new iPhone has launched with last year's chip. So that's interesting to see. And aside from that bit of news, it's basically the same phone. There's some camera upgrades. The main shooter, I believe, is taken from the iPhone 13 Pro. It has an improved front-facing camera. And the one cool thing about all the cameras this year for the iPhone 14, both the iPhone 14 and the Pro line, is it has an autofocus for the front-facing camera. So for all you selfie taker lovers out there, that'll probably be a very nice addition for you. It has this, what they call the photonic engine, which is basically a new image processor to improve the low light performance of all the cameras. So the front and ultra wide get a 2 times performance increase in low light, and the main camera gets a 2.5 increase. It also has an action mode. Again, this also on the Pro lines. This basically adds a new stabilization feature to better stabilize your videos. And another thing that's interesting across all the iPhone 14 lineup is, including the Pros, is in the US, all models will only have eSIM capability, no actual SIM tray card. So if you look on your phone now and you see on the side of it that little kind of oblong rectangle with rounded edges with a little pinhole in it, that's the SIM card tray. So you can't pop out your SIM card and swap it into a new phone or anything like that. You actually have to go through the hassle of transferring SIMs around and eSIMs around, and that's going to be an interesting process. I mean, on the one hand, from the security side of things, it is kind of nice because someone can't just steal your phone and swap their SIM card in there. But at the same time, like, it's also kind of a hassle if you do want, like you say, you want to upgrade your phone. You can't just pop the SIM card out of your old one and pop it into your new one. So that's kind of annoying. But another thing that the iPhone 14s have, with the iPhone 14 Pros as well, is it has crash detection, similar to the Apple Watch. And another feature that they harped on was this emergency SOS feature via satellite. So you'll be able to connect with satellites to, contact emergency services. So it'll basically, how this works is, even if you don't have any connection to cellular or Wi-Fi, you'll be able to connect to a satellite. So you need to have a clear view of the sky to do this. So if there's a lot of like tree cover or something, that's probably not going to have as good of luck. So you need a clear view of the sky, and they have this new UI that allows you, that can like help you orient your phone to the right place in the sky that you should point it to have the best line of sight to the satellite to be able to, send the data you need. And then it'll prompt you with some common emergency questions and responses that you might have to, be able to inform the emergency services. And then, depending on if emergency services are available in your area, it'll either contact them directly, or people at Apple will find a way to get in contact with local emergency services to contact them to get you the help you need. Another thing that you could do is you can also use the satellite feature to add your location in Find My, so people can find you, I guess, if you're into that. It also has one thing that I did find very interesting about this announcement was they said specifically that it was free for the first 2 years with a purchase of a new iPhone, specifically, obviously, the iPhone 14 or 14 Pro line, which is interesting because they didn't mention anything about what happens after those 2 years. My assumption is it's going to turn into some like subscription model, which honestly kind of seems a little scummy in the sense that, like, if you have a phone with this capability to use satellites for communication for emergency services, and after those 2 years are up and you didn't pay for the subscription, you can't connect to the satellites to potentially save your life in a, potentially life-threatening situation. But to Apple's credit, they didn't say it would be a subscription. But because they said it's free for the first 2 years, kind of leads you to believe that it's going to be some kind of subscription. But they have not elaborated on that, so time will tell. So the iPhone 14 starts at $799, which is the same as last year. And then the iPhone 14 Plus starts at $899. Both of them you can order today. The iPhone 14 will be available on September 16th, and the iPhone 14 Plus will be available on October 7th. Personally, I think if you're looking at the iPhone 14, not the Plus model, but just the iPhone 14, just buy yourself an iPhone 13. Unless you seriously want/need the emergency SOS or the crash detection, just get the iPhone 13. It's basically the same phone. And you'll save yourself, I believe, $100 or $200, one of the two. I don't remember. Plus, if you want a mini phone the only way to get a mini phone is to buy the iPhone 13 mini, since that's still available. But personally, I would, unless you want the larger screen size for the iPhone 14 Plus, I would stay away from the iPhone 14 and just either get a Pro version of it, or because those actually have improvements, as we'll get into, or just buy last year's iPhone 13 because it's cheaper and basically the same phone. But moving on to the iPhone 14 Pro line, so they removed the notch, kind of, sort of. Instead of having a notch that takes up a chunk of the screen that goes to the top of the phone, they instead removed it and changed it to this pill-shaped thing, which they called the Dynamic Island. Yeah, it's kind of a weird name, but it is a very cool feature because basically it's because this pill shape is kind of in the middle of the screen, and because it's an OLED display, which means it's a bunch of individual LEDs that you can turn off and on to get actual true blacks. What this allows you to do is basically adjust the size of this pill shape so they can dynamically, which I guess is where the dynamic portion comes from, to be able to dynamically resize this to fit specifically what you're doing. So some of the things that they mentioned was it can change different shapes and sizes depending on what content's being displayed or whatever. So like if you're playing something in like the music app and then you go out and, go about your phone usage, it'll have like the album art like up in the left part of the pill, and then on the right it can have like the little audio waves. And then if you click on that, it'll like dynamically resize this island, I guess you could call it, and it gives you like your media controls like you'd expect. Then another feature that they'll have in there is whenever this live activities actually comes to iOS 16, those can be implemented there. And then it also kind of has some multitasking features in a way, like it can house up to like I believe 2 different apps up in that dynamic island that you can like click on and like bring to focus, and kind of like similar to I guess the control panel in a way, at least for like the music app, I guess. But which I thought was pretty cool that you could like kind of click on the app up there, and it can like open up the app, or there's a bunch of different stuff. So if you haven't seen the demo for how the dynamic island works, I'd recommend checking it out because it does look pretty darn cool. Pretty much I believe all of Apple's first party apps have support for it, and then at that point it'll just become a developer implementation, whatever they can get it rolled out, which is supposed to be included in the Live Activities API that Apple's developing. So I guess it'll kind of be more of a slower rollout of once iOS 16 and the phones get released. So with some other features, it has a brighter screen, it has the same emergency SOS features as the iPhone 14 and the same crash detection. And another new feature that's new this year is it has an always-on display now. So if you're into your phone's display always being on, you can now enable that. So basically what it does is because it has this high refresh panel, they're able to bring the refresh rate all the way down to 1 hertz. So basically it refreshes once every second. On the iPhone 13 Pro line, those could only go down to 10 hertz or 10 refreshes a second. So because it can go down even lower, it presumably will save battery life, although because your screen's always on, that'll also burn battery life, so it's probably just a trade-off, negligible difference, assuming you have the feature on, which I believe you should be able to turn it off. There's probably a setting for that. But basically it just automatically dims the screen, so your screen's not like super bright, so you'll still be able to see like your wallpaper, your notifications, the time, all that good stuff. So that's pretty cool to see. And unlike the regular iPhone 14 line, this one actually gets a new chip. It gets the A16 Bionic. It's on a new 4nm process, which, from my understanding of it, it's basically kind of sort of a modification of their old 5nm process, but I guess slightly smaller. It's not like a completely new architecture or anything like that. It has a 5-core GPU, 6-core CPU, 4 high-efficiency cores and 2 performance cores, 16-core neural engine, And it also has a new built-in display engine, and this is what handles the always-on display, the dynamic island, and all that. So it kind of takes some of that processing power away from the main CPU, which is definitely good to see. Because whenever you can do something, a specific part of the chip, designed for a specific feature, it generally makes things a lot easier and less taxing on your system. So then there was some additional camera improvements. It has the same photonic engine as the iPhone 14, but it has its main camera now has 48 megapixels. So it's basically a 4 times larger sensor. And what this allows it to do is it basically groups 4 pixels into 1 pixel. So it basically bins them. So it basically selects the best pixel out of the 4 that it can take in that group, to improve light capture and keep that same 12 megapixel size. So it has a 2 times performance improvement in low light. And it also has an additional 2 times zoom in it. So instead of the iPhone 13 Pros that had a 0.5, which was the ultra wide, 1 and 3 times zoom, this now has an additional 2 times zoom. And basically how that works is rather than the full 48 megapixel picture, it zooms in on just the 12 megapixels to give you that zoom. You're also able to shoot ProRAW. If you want the actual 48 megapixel resolution, you can do that as well. And then the ultra wide camera got a three times improvement for low light performance. So the pricing for the iPhone 14 Pro models is the same. The just base Pro model starts at $999, and the iPhone 14 Pro Max starts at $1099. Both are available now for you to buy and should be at your door on September 16th if you buy. So that was basically the event. I think the highlights for me personally, the iPhone 14 Pro looked pretty cool. That dynamic island definitely looks like a pretty nice feature. Am I going to upgrade? Definitely not. The iPhone 14 was kind of a letdown because it's basically last year's phone in like the same package and really not much change. I mean, sure, the cameras are better, but if you bought the 13, you're probably not going to notice, or it's honestly, I don't think it's that big of an upgrade to, for you to actually buy the new one. Obviously, you make your own decision. But personally, I like I mentioned, if you're considering the iPhone 14, the base one, not the Plus, just buy the iPhone 13. You're probably not going to notice a difference, and you're going to save yourself some money. But the AirPods Pro, to me, seemed like a pretty nice upgrade. I currently have the original AirPods Pro. I don't think I'm going to be buying the new AirPods Pro just because my current AirPods Pro work perfectly fine. And I think once, once I start noticing like battery life degradation, which I haven't noticed, then I probably would upgrade, but I mean, I don't really see a need. But it definitely looks like some very nice upgrades and improvements there. The Apple Watch Series 8, I don't know. It was kind of a minor update, really. There wasn't a whole lot new there. I'm sure the crash detection's cool, and I guess the temperature sensing is nice, but I don't know. I don't see it that big of huge of an upgrade. The Apple Watch SE, really just a chip upgrade, a spec bump, no new features, nothing. So that's, I guess, kind of a letdown. But the Apple Watch Ultra, while it is expensive, very expensive, and an absolute unit and a chungus of a big boy, it does have a lot of very fancy, nice features, especially if you're into scuba diving at all. Very, very nice to have the built-in dive computer and everything. Or if you're just really into, being outside a lot and, going on adventures and exploring. If you're able to swallow that $800 price tag, might be an interesting option for you. But yeah, that was the event. Had some good points, had some kind of low points, but overall I think it was pretty pretty decent. The visuals of this Apple event were obviously pretty great. All their virtual events that they've done that have been pre-recorded have always had amazing visuals and been very well put together. So I enjoyed watching it. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Dark Assassins podcast. If you did, I'd ask that you leave a rating and review and subscribe to the Dark Assassins podcast if you haven't done so already. And be sure to share with a friend or family member who maybe didn't have a chance to watch the event and wants a recap of what happened, or hear my idiocy of not knowing how DHCP works, apparently, and conflicts of IP addresses. And if you have any questions about this episode, or you want me to answer a question in a future episode, or just get my opinion on something, shoot me an email at contact@darkassassinsinc.com, or you can click the link in the show notes below. And that's going to do it for me in this episode of the Dark Assassins podcast. Until next time, my fellow assassins, remember, bull nothing equals true. If action not equal to null, return true. I'll see you next time on the Dark Assassins podcast.